3 is the magic number. It is also the perfect amount of topics on a Thursday. The Podcast Daily is back. It is Jeremy Birmingham. I am Austin Ward. It's a 3 Things Thursday on the Podcast Daily. Birm, here's what we're doing, all right?
Okay.
One thing you just cannot stop thinking about.
Maybe it's best if you don't tell me all 3 of the things that we're going to do at once.
Oh, that's what you want me to do?
What ends up happening because is that I think ahead and I end up saying all 3 things at once. And I'd rather feel like maybe this will keep me a little bit more on my toes.
Okay, pop quiz. You want it pop quiz style. That's fair. I gave Bill Landis one last week on the Podcast Daily. You want 3 Things Thursday to be pop quiz style. I listened to your request and I granted. That's what we do here. We don't script the show, but we can adjust on the fly. Ohio State plays at Michigan State Saturday night, 7:30. What is one thing about the Buckeyes that you just cannot stop thinking about?
I have actually, and this is putting truth to your word here, because I've been thinking about this since Saturday. I feel like this current Ohio State offense is what happens when you take like super talented teams and add almost like a gimmicky style offense with those teams. And we don't generally see that. Ohio State under Ryan Day, the entire 7 years that he's been the head coach, like the offense has always been pretty freaking good, right? But like it has been built on the back of being like, we're a pro style offense. This is what we're going to do. We're going to run pro style stuff because Ryan Day came from the NFL. And but like they don't even run pro style offenses in the NFL anymore, you know? So, so who cares about lining up and running it down people's throat? Like you can do that in a more effective way if you do what Chip Kelly and this offense are doing, creating mismatches, going unbalanced on different sides of the line, changing. Like I think I've often wondered what would happen if a team that had more talent than anybody else ran like the triple option, for example. We have to go back a long way to really seeing that, right? To Nebraska in the 90s. And because it's an offense that's designed to make you super uncomfortable as a defense and keep you off balance. And I think at times Ohio State has been very comfortable just saying, we're going to line up straight up against you and our better players are going to beat your players. And I think that is a noble mindset, but I don't think it really works forever. And this offense, and the fact is we've only seen, I think, just scraping the surface of what it's going to show all year is really interesting to me, because it feels like one that the Buckeyes are more comfortable than ever doing things that are designed to not just beat the defense, but to confuse the defense. And I don't think that that's always been the case.
I mean, they're almost running a version of the triple option now with the RPOs. It's just a triple option that includes the element of a pass, where 90s Nebraska or 80s Oklahoma didn't really have that option or the ability to do that. I think you've hit on something there that I think is very accurate and scary about where this Ohio State offense can go, because Will Howard does have 3 options on any given play.
Yeah, and the one option that Will talked about on Tuesday in his weekly press conference at Ohio State, that he hasn't really begun to show what he can do as the third option for the Ohio State offense as a real threat in the running game. So like there are all these pieces that are coming together. And as long as they stay healthy, man, it is exciting to see where this offense is going to go. So that's what I can't stop thinking about. I've been thinking about it since Saturday when you watch a team pass for 290 and run for 290, and it was so easy. Like it didn't look like I mean, they were sweating because it was 130 degrees or whatever on the field, but it doesn't look like they broke a sweat on offense at all.
Yeah, I think you made that point. Like you sent that Slack message during the game, from the sideline on Saturday. We talked about it during snap judgments about like Chip Kelly is here and he's doing things that we've never seen Ohio State do before. How did the rest of the college football world let this happen? Chip Kelly has always been, on the cutting edge of offensive innovation, but it was designed to get a schematic advantage when you were at a talent disadvantage. And it is funny how we never really have that conversation. Remember when like a decade ago, Nick Saban was like, is this what you want football to be? Is this what no huddle? Fine, I'll do that. And guess what? You're not going to like it when I start doing with that Alabama players. Like it was always this noble idea. You have better athletes. You should just do it traditionally then. Like, why do you have to get fancy? Why do you have to pull all your guards and go misdirection if you have better players? Just line up and put people in the dirt. Well, why not do both? Why not have a schematic advantage and a talent advantage? That's what seems to be happening now.
It seems like that's the way you would want it to be, because I think that makes you win games. And because every team they're playing is doing it. I mean, we watched the way the Marshall's offense came out and just did totally different things than they've done. Like, that's what everyone else is doing. So why? It has always felt, and that's, I guess, what I'm trying to say, in the last 7 years, even though Ryan Day's offense has been exceptional and the players have been exceptional and the NFL success has been exceptional, it always felt like they were on the field kind of with one hand behind their back. Like, well, we're not going to really do everything we can here because we don't need to. Like, I think that we're seeing them go wide open, and it's fun.
I can't stop thinking about Ryan Day's penalty on Saturday. And if this feels like a broken record from the last couple of weeks or conversation that we had in the offseason about the CEO stuff, I understand. Skip ahead a minute or so and I'll be done talking about it. But I really believe that we've reached a tipping point here where the first couple of weeks it's feeling it out. There was no real crazy adverse moments for Ohio State. And maybe Ryan Day would say, well, he already accepted this in spring ball, although I don't know that that's fully true because he was coaching running backs and engaged in a search to find bring in Carlos Lachlan. I think he was still fighting in some ways the notion that he needed to stop being a position coach, stop being an offensive play caller. The stuff that you're seeing with him, and again, you don't want to cause your team 15 yards. Like, Ryan Day can't get a penalty in every game. That's not the positive. The positive to me is the change in mindset, which I think carried over on Tuesday, where, Bill Landis and I were talking about this on Snap Judgments. Like, he seemed really serious and buttoned down. Like, why? Well, that seems to be, he believes that's what this team, the message that they need this week to refocus and reset ahead of the trip to East Lansing, because non-conference is over and, a fresh challenge awaits. I think that Ryan Day has got his finger on the pulse, not just Sunday through Friday, which we can say maybe he did before, and he could, set a message and the team would listen to that. And sometimes it was too serious and sometimes it was too laser focused on the game. And I think it came to the detriment of the program. But now it includes in-game situations on Saturdays, which I think I'm thinking about what that means down the road. And I think it means nothing but good things for Ohio State.
I'm surprised that after that 15-yard penalty, which again, he says he wasn't swearing at the officials. So if he wasn't and he just raised his voice too loud, then that's a shame on the official for being a crybaby. But if he uttered the magic word, we all know what the magic word is.
What's it start with?
A C. If he uttered the magic word, or an M, depending on which way you go with it. I'm surprised that Chip Kelly, this is where, like, if Ryan Day was the play caller, I'm convinced Ohio State takes a shot to the end zone on the next play. And I was like, when he's that mad and they take themselves out of scoring position on that penalty, I'm surprised they didn't throw a shot to the end zone the next play. Instead, they ran a draw. Like, and I wonder if that's where Chip Kelly being like, okay, calm down, we're just going to move on, is a little different, because in the past, I think that the next play from Ohio State would have been a shot to try to say, you know what, screw you. We don't need those 15 yards. But it seemed like, and I guess I like of the mindset myself where I'm like, man, I would just go take a shot on this next play. I would not.
Well, they needed to. They were facing first and 25.
You're at the second and 25 at the 50. And I would not have conceded the drive like they seem to do, but whatever. They got, when you have the skill players they do, they feel like, hey, we can get it. They didn't, but that's all right.
Yeah. So I think it's a good thing. I just really believe that we're seeing, whether it is a return to form, whether that's rediscovering, himself, the personality, mentality, whatever, I don't know the right way to put it. I just feel like in real time, we're seeing a shift back to the best version of Ryan Day, the one that we saw having that great success early on and, coming within a few bad calls of winning a national championship in 2019. Like that's what Ohio State needs its leader to be. And I think that he's on his way to doing that now. It doesn't mean that they're done. They've only played 3 games and they are starting the Big Ten action on Saturday night in East Lansing. So there's a long way to go, but I do believe that they're on the right track. So that's not me rethinking anything. But thing number 2, Burr, is something about the Buckeyes that you are rethinking as they head into Big Ten play?
I guess I would say that after 3 games of watching Arvell Reese on the field, I am rethinking if it makes sense to not have him be a starting linebacker for this team.
Okay.
And it's not meant to be a knock on Sonny Styles or Cody Simon or whoever. Obviously, we heard Jim Knowles talk at length about Arvell on Tuesday and how the plan is he's going to be in the middle no matter what. He's on a, what did he say, a calculated path to greatness or something like that. Like, so you're not going to move him around. You're not going to put him at the will. And so if that's the case, I think Cody's probably better suited to play out there next to Arvell. So I'm beginning to wonder if his instincts and his ability to make plays, even when the Buckeyes seem out of place or maybe a step behind because of his athleticism, like if he's someone that just needs to be on the field more than any other linebacker. And that is something I can't believe. Maybe it's not a starter. I don't know. You say whatever you want, semantics being what they are. Mm-hmm. And I know he's been the guy that's been on the field for the 3rd most reps, but I'm beginning to wonder if maybe we're beginning to see something really special for the next 2 years from number 20. And I don't know that he should be off the field in meaningful moments at this point.
I was surprised. Were you, about how forcefully Jim Knowles said he must play Mike and there is no other option? Like,
I mean, a little, just because we look at him in the 6'4", 235, 240 pound frame, like you see like big outside linebacker guy. But again, the conversation about Arvell in the last year was we need to let him figure this game out from a mental standpoint, right? And what Jim Knowles said is they didn't want to throw any wrenches into the plan. Like, so to me, it says, hey, he's got this sorted out now. He knows what he's doing at Mike. Let's not muddy the picture for the next 8 weeks by trying to have him do other things. Because right now, I don't think you've seen enough out of Sonny Styles or even Cody Simon in the last, after Saturday, because he looked a little flat-footed at times, to say, well, we feel great about where those guys are. We can experiment with Arvell. Like, so to me, I think it's a byproduct of like everyone right now, they'd like to play in multiple spots, but no one is outside of Arvell is playing well enough in their spot, I think, to allow that sort of flexibility.
I think that's the part that you mentioned there, Berm, that really had me, I don't know, taken aback by that a little bit, which was they spent all this time in March and April, and James Laurinaitis and Jim Knowles are talking about in training camp, hey, really, there's no difference. These positions are interchangeable in our defense. Mike, Will, you need to know both positions. And if, the offense shifts the formation to the other side of the field, you need to be able to adjust. We don't want to have to flip the sides of the linebackers. Like, they've made this point that like everyone's cross training and everyone knows both positions and you should be able to do both. And it's like, I'm not a multi-million-dollar defensive coordinator or a Hall of Fame linebacker. So I always defer to their judgment. But what they were telling us before sounded like the Mike and Will in this situation doesn't make that big of a difference. And then, but with Arvell, it does. And
yeah, I think that's probably because Arvell really wasn't in the conversation in the spring.
Yeah, that's true.
And now, like, everyone needs to learn that stuff, but everyone still learns it at a different pace. And so, like, when you find something that's working and it's clearly working when Arvell's in the game at Mike, then it may be worth doing some other maneuvering around that you hadn't intended to. Because when we had this conversation with James Laurinaitis and Jim Knowles in March, it was about Cody Simon and Sonny Styles and CJ Hicks and Gabe Powers. And then it was like, and then Arvell's out there too. And now it's like, Arvell's out there. Now it changes everything. So
then they really just throw another wrinkle out there. It's like, well, now Sonny's going to wear the lightning bolt on his helmet and he's going to help call the plays. I'm like, what? It seems to me like Jim Knowles doesn't care at all about in-helmet communication. Yeah. He doesn't seem to care about that. But it's like all these things are just messing with my mind, which I guess is why number 2 was rethinking things. You made a great choice there. Mine is this long-held notion. As long as I've been covering this team and as long as I've been covering college football, it's always been, you got to find 5 offensive linemen, and then you got to let them build chemistry and cohesion, and they got to be able to communicate. and you want them together at all times. And then if you have to make, depth changes and throughout the game, or you want somebody to get a break, you can do that. I'm like, for the first time that I've been covering Ohio State, I'm watching a rotation at guard in key situations, and I'm like, that actually makes a lot of sense. I don't know if it's just because they've never been in a situation where there's truly not been a drop-off, and we'll see if that remains the case on Saturday against Michigan State, or if they would still do that against Iowa, still do that against Oregon, do that at Penn State. I don't know. But Austin Sarabeld and Tegra Shabola, and the way it was described by Ryan Day, with not just an ability to keep guys fresh, but because they're so young in their starting careers, 3 games for Tegra, 2 games for Austin Sarabeld before going to the bench when Donovan Jackson returned. It's like, hey, maybe you can get some reps and then come to the sideline and watch it on the tablet, the vaunted tablet, which has changed so many things on the Ohio State sideline. Doesn't seem like that's a situation at tackle. And I don't think we're probably going to see that. But even just to get to guy number 6 actually playing significant reps is a change where I didn't know that was ever going to happen for Ohio State.
Probably. I mean, I wouldn't have expected it to, but I view this in the way that, like, I view tacos or you view pieces of pizza, right? Like, 5 of them are good, but if I can have 6 or 7 or 8 really good tacos, I'm fine with that too. So
yeah.
I don't need to stop at 5 tacos if I have 8, like if 8 are there and 8 are all,
it'd be wasteful,
and all are of the same quality and all are crunchy and delicious and cheesy and have that, the occasional burst of coolness and then the heat. Like, I want all of it. So give me all the tacos that are edible. And right now, Austin Saraveld's playing like an edible taco. So you got to keep him on the field.
Huh. I hadn't put it in those terms or hadn't thought about it in those terms, but you're absolutely right, partner. You got to get all the pizza you can before it goes bad, and you don't want to be wasteful.
No, you only have the window of opportunity to eat a piece of pizza or a taco right when it's fresh, right when it's at its best. Mm-hmm. It is a small window. And 45 minutes later, that piece of pizza is probably still going to be okay and still going to taste pretty good. But if you get it right away and you wash it down with a cold Coke Zero, woohoo, buddy.
Well, you want beer. You want beer with your pizza.
I don't like beer with my food.
Yeah, I know you don't. Okay. Thing number 3. We have arrived. It is the last of the 3 things on a Thursday. It is something that is annoying you going into the start of Big Ten play. And I will go first because I have something right here that has me annoyed for the start of Big Ten play. I opened up the credential packet. I said, oh man, it's that time of year. We're going back to East Lansing. I hate complaining about doing our job. We have the best job in the world. We cover Ohio State football. We get to go travel and see every single game. And complaining about the logistics of that always makes me feel really bad. But this is the dumbest thing in America. If you want to charge people to have a meal at Spartan Stadium, and if you don't know, I held this up. Sorry if you're listening, audio only. This is the Michigan State meal ticket. Berm and I have a combined 4 of these for Saturday. I don't think Berm has ever used his because he likes to stay on the field and doesn't come upstairs. But they are good for 1 hot dog, bratwurst, or pretzel in the Michigan State press box. Nobody else does it this way. I've never covered a game anywhere else. I've been places where they charge you for food, and if that's the approach that you want to take, okay, so be it. 1 hot dog, bratwurst, or pretzel. Also, if you want a cheese cup, you're going to have to pay for that. That's separate. That's not on the meal ticket. Okay?
Is mustard free?
You can get mustard for free. But they don't have spicy mustard. You got to have yellow mustard. I don't want that on my pretzel. Also, the pretzel that they serve is like a frozen pretzel that is terrible. And like, it's not frozen when you hand it to me. They hand it to you. It's been warming in one of those rotating things, but they're hard and stale and gross.
Maybe Jonathan Smith has addressed the pretzel issue.
I highly doubt that he has, because we're still getting these same tickets, which don't even attempt, to make. So
what's irritating you? Is it the pretzel? Is it the fact that we're in the year 2024 and the Big Ten, each team is making hundreds of millions of dollars from TV revenue deals, and they're charging us to park as part of the media, and charging you essentially to 50 cents for a cheese cup?
All of those things, yes. If you are in a league that you have made a huge deal, what's this game on Saturday night, Berm? It is streaming on Peacock. Yes, streaming on the cock on Saturday night. It was a huge deal when this broadcast arrangement was made. Then you bring in NBC and CBS, and you say it's $1.2 billion, baby. The Big Ten is rich. We're high rolling. And then some of members of your school, some schools in your conference, I should say, are like, can't afford to have meals for the people that are bringing attention to the games that we're watching. And maybe people would watch it no matter what. But I think that the Big Ten prefers that the fan bases stay engaged all week long. And the best way to do that is by having media members talking about Michigan State and Ohio State and never stopping 365 days a year. Everywhere else in the country recognizes the value. And hey, we're going to be in that stadium for 8 hours. If I need to pack a lunch, I'll do that. I might have to this week. I'll just be an adult in that situation. But I just think that these things right here make a mockery of the Big Ten.
It's also annoying because we're been doing this long enough that we know, for example, that like whether it's Fox's TV crew or Peacock's, like they will have food catered for them. Mm-hmm. So they won't have the same thing, but whatever. There's just a number of teams in the Big Ten that haven't caught up to the fact that they are in the arguably the richest conference in college football.
No, it's not even arguable. They are the richest conference.
And they still treat it like they're high school teams. And that is, it is puzzling and frustrating. So I agree. Now, on the flip side, Michigan State has the best media workroom in the Big Ten. So I'm going to be content with that this weekend. So at least there's that.
That's true.
And they do generally give us pizza post game for free. So,
unless you're actually doing work, because our last visit there and the one before that, you and I were doing content and all of the pizza was gone because they don't count the number of people who are there. And it's not even because I wanted to go back to thing number 2, 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 slices of pizza. No. I didn't get a single slice. They were all gone.
I think that there's a weird thing that the league does, and it's a league-wide issue. Not understanding when Ohio State is coming to town that things are going to be different than when any other team comes to your program. At Penn State, we're in a room that is a closet with 40 media members, 40 photographers, and then the press conference room afterward is a closet. Like and I know Penn State is putting a lot of money into renovating stuff, but like, come on, like everyone
not the press box.
We know. I think they are in the next couple of years. Everyone knows that Ohio State is going to bring more media to your stadium than anywhere else in the country. So it's time. Like, it's not new. Okay, it'll be new for UCLA or USC or Washington or Oregon. So I'll understand if they haven't figured it out yet. But once you realize this happens every other year, it seems to me like it's something you should be prepared for. But whatever. I'm going to say something that annoys me, and I'll probably get accused of being a homer or whatever, or wearing scarlet colored glasses, or just kissing Ryan Day's ass, whatever. The conversation about the lack of sacks and Ohio State is interesting to me. And I think they have 5 in the first 3 games. I don't know how many they had last year through 3 games, and I don't really care. But, as I listened to the Sunday Sound Off by Bill Landis on Sunday and Doug on Kings of Columbus, also found on the podcast channel, like, subscribe, do all that stuff now if you're watching this. 26 of 31 dropbacks from Marshall were 1-step or no-step passes. Like, that's hard to get a sack. And Ryan Day seemed particularly angry at the notion on Tuesday in the press conference, which was live streamed on the podcast. You can find it. You know what? And I think I understand it. Like, he's doing it in a way that is nuanced enough, because he said, and I think this was the interesting part about what he said, you could see him starting to, like, the cartoons when the faces start to get redder and redder. Like, he did say that people need to understand, and he said, including JT and Jack. So that sort of get left out in that conversation, that stats are more than just sacks. And impact is more than just sacks. So I think that he's probably realizing that his players are also frustrated in that moment, that they're not getting home, and that the offenses that they're playing are adapting and doing what Marshall did. But I don't think, like, what I don't like, what irritates me, is that we can't have a conversation that's nuanced enough to approach both sides of the argument. Because let's say that there are 26 of 31 dropbacks that are one step or no step drops. That means there's 6 of 32. What, I'm not great at math. Is that what's that 15% of dropbacks? So that, especially in the first drive, and again, this is where I hate to get nitpicky, but it's the first drive of the game, and you talked about it with Zach Boren, and people can watch that later on Buckeye Q. But like that first drive of the game is always the uncomfortable one because you don't really know. I think 3 of those more than 1 or 2 step drops came in that first drive, where Marshall had Ohio State pretty much off balance. But what I'm watching is pass rushers running past the quarterback multiple times and allowing a guy that is mobile to step up into an empty pocket and move. So like, I think that there's a conversation where we can say, Jack, JT, you need to be more disciplined in your pass rush, while also saying, if you don't get home, that's okay. But you're not only not getting to the quarterback in that situation against Marshall multiple times, you're then completely evacuating the middle of the defense and letting the quarterback go and run for 6, 7, 8 yards, or then have 5, 6 seconds to wait for a guy to get open. So like, what I'm ultimately annoyed about is that there is no ability to have nuanced conversation. And I think that's something that's been on my mind all week. Since we started talking about the end of the Marshall, since we started talking on snap judgments at the end of the Marshall game, like we can be very comfortable knowing Ohio State won that game by 35 points and was never in doubt. They didn't give up a point in the second half. They only gave up 3.1 yards of play or whatever. But you can also look at it and say, well, that first drive and the last drive of the first half certainly had some areas where we could be concerned, because if you let Aiden Childs, who's a much better athlete than Stone Earl, have that sort of time this Saturday, or that sort of a room to run this Saturday, it might be irritating. And again, everything now leads to a road to Oregon, Penn State, and like, how would Drew Aller handle those plays? How would Dylan Gabriel handle those plays? Like, that's where you have to be able to at least be self-critical enough to be like, hey, we didn't do well enough, but also the outside noise, why don't you get sacks? Those things don't really matter, because the coaches have a much better vantage point of everything than we do. And a lot of times what gets passed off as coach speak is actually the truth, and saying, you know what, these things are important. It's important to hit the quarterback. Obviously Stone Earl ended up leaving the game with an injury. Like, you want to affect the quarterback, but you also don't need to sack the quarterback every play to be effective. And maybe I'm just rambling, but I feel like there's somewhere that we're missing the ability to have contextualized conversation when it comes to sports. And I'm going to even spin it off that even further. I don't know which talking head on ESPN radio somewhere it was on Tuesday morning talking about how Joe Burrow let down the Bengals. Joe Burrow is the reason that, like, if you didn't watch the game, just say it. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to. The Bengals scored 33 points and Joe Burrow had like 140 passer rating. Like, if that's not good enough in the NFL, maybe you shouldn't be watching that sport anymore. So I think there's just a lack of contextualization around any sports conversation right now, because everything is so hot takey and so black and white that it's not really positive or encouraging discourse at all.
Whew. Yeah, that's a lot there.
Sorry,
I think it's okay. It's the only part. I think when you're talking about the context, that is important. And because Ryan Day and Jim Knowles both made it a point, maybe not directly, sometimes subtly. Yes, the sack number is not what had Ohio State, had their attention. I don't even want to characterize how they're feeling about it.
Irritated, Ryan Day, and Jim Knowles said he was irritated.
I didn't. Yeah, he said I want to be careful about that, because I don't think that anyone is viewing it as a full-blown panic situation for Ohio State. But clearly they did not think that Ohio State's defensive line met the standard on Saturday. Or if you want to say the defense as a whole, fine. But I think that primarily this came down to the defensive line performance on Saturday. By no means.
I think it's probably a front seven conversation, but I think all those things work together. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, like, we can all put it into context and better. But the point that you're making, I think, is it wasn't about getting sacks in that game. That wasn't the statistical barometer. That wasn't the standard. Ohio State and the coaching staff understood 0 step, 1 step. You're not going to be sacking the quarterback that frequently. But there were other ways that they were not impacting the game, primarily when against the rush and the threat of the quarterback run that had their attention. So, thinking that if they had stumbled into 2 or 3 sacks in this game, that like there wouldn't have been anything to talk about, I think that would be off base. Like that's just not the number that's going to illustrate success or failure of Ohio State's defense in that game, or their defensive line, or their linebackers. Like that's just
you got the sack with Caden Curry in the second quarter. In the third quarter, we saw a play where Mitchell Melton and Kenyatta Jackson both missed the backup quarterback as he was rolling out, and he scrambled and threw the ball away. If he gets a sack there, does it change anything the way people feel? I don't think it does. So it's about discipline, and I think Saturday's issue was a lack of discipline by the front four, and not necessarily a lack of statistical. Like in that game, what their job was to contain, to make sure that the linebackers had a clear view at what the quarterback and running back was doing, and I don't think that happened.
Yeah, and as you said, you can see some of that, at least from the first drive in Buckeye Q with Zach Boren later on Thursday. It's you could also watch and pay attention to maybe how, what happens to contain on the edge with the defensive ends and what happens with the defensive tackles. Like it's pretty interesting. Again, to say that the first drive of that game against Marshall, or even the entire first half, that it wasn't corrected and that it won't be moving forward, I don't think that's not how I feel. Yeah. That's what we saw happen on Saturday, and I think it's what Ohio State and Jim Knowles and Larry Johnson and James Laurinaitis and everybody else on that staff are trying to get ready to go, because they play a Big Ten game on Saturday night at Spartan Stadium in East Lansing, Michigan. The podcast, of course, will be there. We thank you for joining us right now on a Three Things Thursday. He's Berm. I'm Austin. We'll talk to you later.